All right, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel, and today I've got another deck profile video. Y'all really enjoyed the first one on the Charizard deck, and of course today's deck profile is going to be on Ancient Box, which I actually think is a fairly underrated deck right now and genuinely could be a good play to EUIC. And I'm excited to show off my new Ancient Box deck that I've been working on here and really enjoying in today's video. But like I said, y'all really enjoyed the Charizard deck profile I made a couple weeks back. A lot of support in that video, a lot of positive comments, a lot of you really liked it, so I want to thank you all once again for all the support on the Charizard video. And if you want me to make more of these deck profile videos, leave a like on the video, leave a comment down below, and subscribe too, just so I know that you guys seem to enjoy these videos. So I want to thank you all once again for the support on that, and hopefully we can continue more support here, because I really enjoyed making the Charizard one. I want to make more of these deck profile videos. I had a blast making the Charizard one, and I'm going to have a lot of fun making this one. I've got some cool ideas in mind for more deck profile videos. But yeah, like I said, today's deck profile is on Ancient Box, which I think is a fairly strong deck right now in our meta. I think it kind of got better with the new format that we got with Prismatic Evolutions, because Charizard EX fell off. Charizard was one of Ancient Box's worst matchups. So now that Charizard has fallen off, that's a pretty good thing for this deck. And of course, the main attacker is going to be that one prize Roaring Moon here. With the attack at Vengeance Fletching, does 70 plus 10 more damage for each ancient card in your discard pile. The whole gimmick of the deck is you discard a ton of ancient cards, you know, the Pokemon, the items, the supporter cards. You get rid of all of them, and then your Vengeance Fletching can do some insane numbers. Usually 200 plus damage is pretty common, but you can definitely make this Roaring Moon hit upwards of like 300 damage in the late game, which is very, very good versus stuff like Archaladon, even Raging Bolt, and obviously Dragapult is another big one. One of the things I like about Roaring Moon is it's a Dark type, so if you play against Gardevoir, you have a pretty easy time dealing with their deck because you are a Dark type Pokemon, and you can hit for weakness versus the Gardevoir EX. Usually you beat them if you get one turn where you can just one-shot their Gardevoir EX without them being able to Turo it. That's usually how that matchup can go. In this deck, we're actually not playing any Roaring Moon EX. It's literally just the Baby Moon as your main Roaring Moon. There is an EX in the deck, but like I said, it's not the Roaring Moon EX. We are playing 4 copies of the Baby Moon. We have to play 4 of these. We're just maxing it out. It's your main attacker in the deck. Playing 4 of these, we have many ways to build it up, you know, via Sawdust Vitality. We have some pretty interesting methods of discarding ancient cards so that this moon can hit some pretty good numbers. Sometimes by like turn 2 or 3, we can do over 200 damage. Now, to support the moon are the other ancient cards. That first one, the most important one, probably is going to be the Flutter Mane. We're playing 4 copies of these. We're not really ever like attacking with it. It's mainly just here for discard fodder, in all honesty, but there are going to be the rare moments where it actually ends up being useful. It's got that Midnight Fluttering ability. When it's in the active spot, your opponent's active Pokemon has no abilities. In the rare instance, this can be very useful against a deck like Lost Box, where they can't use Flower Select. It can sometimes be good against a deck like Miraidon, where sometimes they start Miraidon, but then you start Flutter, and then they can't Tandem Unit, and it makes it a little awkward for them. So there's like some funny things you can do with Flutter Mane. Good against like Archaladon, or even Charizard, sometimes if you play against Charizard, which it's fallen off quite a bit, but on the rare occasion, it's sometimes awkward to have a Flutter Mane in the active. Your opponent has to be a little bit more careful with how mobile they're going to be with their abilities when this is in the active spot. Sometimes you use Hex Hurl. Not often, though, but, you know, the rare occasion this does come up. Sometimes against a deck that uses Iron Hands, this card does not want to be on the board because it can get amped really easily. Where the Roaring Moon has 140 HP, cannot be amped as easily. But we do have some fighting support in the deck to help us out. The first one is going to be the Great Tusk here with Land Collapse. Discard the top card of your opponent's deck. If you play an Ancient Supporter from your hand this turn, you get to discard 3 more cards. We're not playing any fighting energy in the deck, so our 2 other fighting Pokemon literally are just here for moral support without needing fighting energy. But Land Collapse is the main reason why we play Great Tusks. Sometimes we start with Great Tusk. We can sit there and Land Collapse the opponent and mill some of their important resources while we build up our discard pile, and then in the late game, the moon can do more damage. That's the main reason why the Great Tusk is in here. Also, sometimes you can catch your opponent lacking, and you can actually deck them out with Land Collapse. If your opponent is being a little bit too uncareful of their resources, you can just go Land Collapse and deck them out of nowhere, which makes this card a pretty funny card in the deck. It's just another ancient Pokemon that can be just good discard fodder. And then we have another attacker in the deck here via the Koraidon. Now, this one we actually might use more often than not. It's got the attack Unrelenting Onslaught for 2 cost energy, does 30 damage, and if one of your ancient Pokemon used an attack last turn, you do 150 more damage, which is 180, obviously. Now, you can only use this card usually if you use Tusk or Roaring Moon before you attack with this. Obviously, you can't Koraidon and then use Unrelenting Onslaught for 180 damage. But when that does come up, it's nice. It's also just a fighting Pokemon, which is very important right now against fighting weak Pokemon like Iron Hands. This card is very useful against Miraidon, which is one of the main reasons why we play 2 copies of it. Those are all the ancient Pokemon in the deck. for the most part, they're all going to be in the bin. You're usually just trying to put Roaring Moons on the board, but there are going to be those rare occasions where these other ancient Pokemon end up being useful. But we do have some other support Pokemon in the deck to help us out. The first one is Radiant Greninja. This Pokemon is very important to play in the deck. Its ability, conceal cards, puts Dark Energy in the discard pile. It's not only one of the only ways we actually get to draw cards in this deck to keep our deck afloat, but it also synergizes with Sada's Vitality, which is one of the only ways we can power up our Roaring Moon EX. So obviously we have to play Ninja. Sometimes you get really bad games where you prize Greninja. It can happen. We're not playing a heavy ball in this deck. If you prize the Greninja, it sucks. It's not the end of the world because we do have other ways to discard energy, but Ninja is a very crucial card. It draws you cards. It's your draw engine, essentially. Now, Dragapult is very popular right now. It's a matchup that actually you can struggle against because they're so beefy, but we do have a decent tech card for that matchup, and that is the Monkey Dory, if it wants to focus. I apologize for that. Yeah, Monkey Dory's got the ability, Adrenabrain, when it's got a Dark Energy on it, you get to put up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your other opponent's Pokemon. The gimmick behind the Monkey Dory is if you're playing against Dragapult, you can use the Monkey Dory to essentially heal your moons on the bench, because when they Phantom Dive, they have to put damage on the bench. You can heal that Roaring Moon. Usually the heal damage isn't actually that relevant. It's just nice because it lets you do 30 more damage to Dragapult. Because at the end of the game, you actually might have a moment where that Adrenabrain actually lets you hit the perfect amount of damage to one-hit KO a Dragapult, which is why this card is important. Also against Budew, if your opponent just sits there and Budews you, I mean, let's be real here. Your Roaring Moon, weak to Grass. Your Koraidon is, well, Koraidon's weak to Psychic. Actually, yeah, they're weak to Psychic. Never mind. I thought they were weak to Grass. But no, for the most part, the Moon is weak to Grass, right? So if you're getting Budewed in the active spot and you're not attacking, you can at least try to Monkey Dory to, like, heal some of the Budew damage. But yeah, the Monkey Dory is mainly just there as a way to deal with Dragapult. It lets us do more damage because Dragapult's 320 HP is sometimes a little bit too high for us to reach, even at the end of the game when we've exhausted all of our resources and our discard pile's looking pretty fat. Usually the Monkey Dory is what you need to help close the game out. The last Pokemon in the deck is going to be the Pecharunt here. This is kind of a tech card for Snorlax, but also comes up in instances where you need it. It's got that ability where you can switch in one of your dark Pokemon, except for Pecharunt, into the active, and then you poison that Pokemon. So you might poison your Moon, or you might not. There's a tool card in the deck to help support you. But the idea behind this card is, one, if you're playing against Snorlax, you never lose because they cannot stall a Roaring Moon. You can infinitely use Pecharunt and constantly switch your Moon into the active spot and swing with Vengeance Fletching. You literally can't lose to Snorlax with this card. Also, it's nice to have if you start with Great Tusk or Koraidon and you need to move it, you can bench Pecharunt and switch freely. Also against Budew, it can be very important as a way to pivot Moon into the active spot under item lock. I really want to play Pheasantipity in here too. I debated actually not playing Pecharunt. I debated Pheasantipity over Pecharunt. I think Fez is still a very useful card in this deck, and honestly, you know, an updated build might play a Pheasantipity over Pecharunt. I don't know if you want to play both Peck and Fez, because then you have multiple 2-prizers in the deck. You don't want to start with a 2-prizer. One of the main things that makes this deck so strong is it's focused solely on using one prize Pokemon. So when you start with Pecharunt or Pheasantipity, it's on the board forever, and your opponent can take an easy 2-prize KO on it, which a lot of the time can lose you the game in the long run. One of the benefits of this deck is you force your opponent usually to take all 6 prizes. So that's why I don't really want to play the Fez and the Pecharunt, but I definitely want to play one of the 2 in the deck for sure. And that's all the Pokemon in the deck. Now we get into the trainers and supporters, and of course there are a lot of important ones in the deck, like of course the main draw supporter here, the main engine, the Professor Sada's Vitality. This is how we're going to power up our Roaring Moons every turn. You choose up to 2 of your bench ancient Pokemon, or 2 of your ancient Pokemon, sorry, and you attach a Dark Energy from discard pile to those Pokemon. So we strictly need the Sada to power up our Roaring Moons. This is how we're going to be fueling our Roaring Moons every single turn and building them up. You can build up 2 Moons in one turn, right? You Sada to a bench Moon, you Sada to the active, you attach the active. The bench Moon has an energy on it. Sometimes you don't even have to Sada again to that Moon on the bench, and the active is also then fully powered up. Also, it's an ancient card, right? It's just more fuel for Moon's attack. And then, of course, we do have Explorer's Guidance, the other ancient card in the deck. I got the full arts here. Hopefully we can read it here. Look at the top 6 cards of your deck, and then you discard 4 of them, then you take 2 and put them in your hand. Basically, this card is an ancient card, like you discard it for free with its effect, but you also get to discard even more cards. You discard 4 cards. So usually, Guidance helps you ramp up damage really quickly. This card can be grief sometimes. There are actually going to be a lot of games where you play the Explorer's Guidance and you accidentally get rid of very important resources like multiple good cards. So sometimes this card can punish you and you can get really bad Explorer's Guidances. A lot of the time it can lose you the game, even if you have to make some pretty tough decisions on the spot, and that decision comes to bite you later on in the game. But usually if you get a nice clean guidance where you're discarding useful resources and taking useful resources into your hand, this card gets a lot of value, and it can ramp up Moon's damage quite nicely. And then finally, the other supporter, obviously, we're just going to play one copy of Boss's Order. Usually we're playing from behind, so we're going to be using Counter Catcher more often than not, but it's still good to have a boss in the deck. We do play a Pal Pad, so we can use this card twice. A lot of the time, boss for game comes up with this deck, so it's really good to have a Boss's Order in the deck for the supporter count. All right, on to the trainers, and these are the most important cards in the deck, in my opinion, because this is where the bulk of the discards come in. Of course, we got 4 Earthen Vessel. Earthen Vessel, not only is it just a really good card in a deck like Roaring Moon because it finds you Dark Energy for Sada, it's also an Ancient card. This card discards a card from your hand, so a lot of the time you can Vessel away a Pokemon like a Fluttermane or something, and then that adds 2 into the discard pile. And then, of course, you also get to get energy out of your deck for Radiant Greninja and to attach for turn. So we're obviously going to max out of these and play 4 copies of the Earthen Vessel. It is super important. And then we got to play 4 copies of the Ancient Booster Energy Capsule. This is an Ancient tool card. Not only is it discard fodder, but it comes up in a lot of different scenarios. You can put onto your Ancient Pokemon, and they give plus 60 HP. This is actually important to have on like a Fluttermane, so it can't get killed by Iron Hands. Really good to put on your Roaring Moons, so against Gardevoir, it's actually a lot harder for them to knock out your Roaring Moons. A lot of the Guardiolists now have cut Drifloon out, so they're actually relying a little bit more on like stuff like Screamtail. So Booster Capsule makes it really awkward for the Screamtail because it can't one-shot the Roaring Moon. Even with 1 Monkey Dory ping, they're still 10 damage short. So this card is very useful against decks like Gardevoir, and it's also just nice to have the extra HP in some instances, which is why we play 4 copies of it. And of course, it's an Ancient card we want to discard for Moon's attack, right? We got 4 Nest Ball to find our basic Pokemon. One of the issues this deck does face is we can't Poffin for most of our Pokemon. Most of the time, you have to play Nest Ball to find them, but we do have 2 Ultra Ball in the deck, which can help us discard cards from our hand, and also gets you Pokemon, right? It discards Ancient cards for free and gets you Pokemon. It's another way to find Pokemon if need be. It's a little bit awkward in the early game, because sometimes your early game hands are, like, kind of important. Like, there's good cards in your hand you don't want to discard, so that's why we have to play 4 copies of the Nest Ball. You could play a Heavy Ball in the deck if you want. It's really hard to find it, though, when you need it, because you don't really have a way to cherry pick it out for free, but a Heavy Ball could be nice because sometimes you prize a Moon, sometimes you prize Greninja, right, and you need to find it, so Heavy Ball could be good, but I like the count of 4 Nests, 2 Ultras. Then we got 2 copies of Night Stretcher. Very good card. It gets you an energy back in your hand and a Pokemon. Pretty useful to get back a Moon, obviously, so you can just keep benching Moons over and over again to keep attacking with the Roaring Moon, which is why we do play 2 Night Stretcher in the deck. Usually the Bills would play 2 Super Rod. Still going to play 1 copy of Super Rod. It puts Pokemon energy in the deck. Sometimes you actually need both the Pokemon and the energy in some instances, so it's very important to still have a Rod in the deck over the Night Stretcher. Again, most builds usually would play like 2 Rod, but I like the count of 2 Night Stretcher, 1 Rod in this new version of the deck. To make our deck a little bit more consistent with finding supporters, like I said, we don't have an engine. There's no Lumineon in the deck, no Fez. We're going to play 3 copies of Pokegear. Look at the top 7 cards of your deck. Reveal supporter card you find there and put it in your hand. Very important card to have in the deck to help find your Sadas and your Explorer's Guidances early on in the game, or even in the late game, because of a certain Stadium card we play. And then, of course, we got 2 copies of Counter Catcher. Like I said, Boss's Order is really good in the deck. We do obviously still play the boss, but the Counter Catcher is useful because a lot of the time we're going to be playing from behind with this deck. Usually we're not taking knockouts with Moon. Not until the mid to late game is when we're one-shotting stuff, and then Counter Catcher is going to be live a lot of the time, and, you know, we need this to gust stuff out and knock them out pretty easily, so we're going to play 2 Counter Catcher in the deck. We got 1 Pal Pad. Very important to get back your Sadas. A lot of the time, you can actually run out of Sada because you mill them with Pokestop, or Explorer's Guidance even can sometimes be a little awkward. And Pal Pad is good because if you get Iono'd, you want to make sure you're drawing into Sadas, so it's important to have a Pal Pad to make sure you get those cards back into the deck. Then we got the Superior Energy Retrieval. Another way to discard cards from your hand, but also puts you energy in your hand. Sometimes you just need to put energy in your hand so you can loop Moon attacks and all that stuff. Retrieval is really good. Also puts an energy for Greninja. Like, there's a lot of useful things that come up when you play this card. It's one of the best cards in the deck in the late game, in my opinion, and it's a really good card to have. So definitely want to play 1 copy of Superior Energy Retrieval. It's a very, very strong card within this deck. Now, this is where things might be a little controversial. And that is the A-Spec of choice. Now, Ancient Box, I've seen play 3 A-Spec cards. We got Secret Box, Brilliant Blender, and Awakening Drum. Awakening Drum is cute because it's an Ancient card, draws you cards. It's a little bit of a weaker card, though. You don't usually use it that much, or its value is very diminished. Brilliant Blender is very powerful because you can use Blender to discard a ton of ancient cards at once. You can discard 5 of them, boosting your damage out of nowhere. The main issue I have with Blender is, one, it's really hard to find when you need it. It's really good in the early game, I find. It's just hard to find Blender when you want to use it. In my opinion, the best consistency card in the deck for an A-Spec would be Secret Box, right? You discard 3 cards from your hand. Again, not a bad card to play in a deck where you want to discard your ancient cards. So if you have a handful of ancient Pokemon and stuff because you sought it a bunch of times, Secret Box actually saves you because you discard 3 ancient Pokemon and then whatever 3 ancient cards from your hand. And then you get to search deck for an item, a tool, a supporter, and a stadium card. This gets you everything you need to set up. It gets you a Soda, it gets you an ancient booster capsule, it gets you a Pokestop, and it gets you an item. So you can get a Night Stretcher, a Nest Ball, something like that. This card, in my opinion, is the best A-Spec in Ancient Box. I know Blender is a very good card to play too, and I do like Brilliant Blender, but I truly think Secret Box is the best A-Spec to play with an Ancient Box still going forward. It's sometimes your hand is completely dead, and you need something like a Secret Box to find Soda to play the game, right? So this card is just really good to have. A lot of the time, it's literally just a 5th copy of Soda's Vitality, which is why it's good. Finally, I'm playing One Lost Vacuum. It's basically just here for Gardevoir, Raging Bull, Miraidon to get rid of Bravery Charm. Gardevoir is now playing Hero's Cape as their A-Spec, which actually kind of is annoying for Roaring Moon sometimes. So it's nice to have the Lost Vacuum to knock out the Gardevoir, or even the Screamtail. They go Hero's Cape, Screamtail to KO Roaring Moon. You can vacuum, knock it out, and take an extra prize card, which a lot of the time gives you a pretty big advantage in the Gardevoir matchup. And it's very important to get rid of Bravery Charm versus stuff like Miraidon and against Raging Bull, so you can hit those higher numbers a lot more easily, which is why we got to play 1 copy of Vacuum in the deck. It's a very cuttable card. This is definitely the most cuttable card in the deck, in my opinion. If you wanted to make room for another Ancient Pokemon or another, item card you want to play, definitely this is the most cuttable card in my opinion. But I like playing Vacuum. It's just a really useful card. It does put a card into the Lost Zone from your hand, so you don't want to use it with an ancient Pokemon. You're not discarding it, you're putting it into the Lost Zone. Sometimes it can grief you, but I like having it in the deck. Now, part of the draw engine is also going to be the stadium card Pokestop. Once during each player's turn, that player may discard the top 3 cards of their deck. You take all the items you reveal there and put them in your hand. This is a great way to not only discard ancient stuff for the discard pile for Moon, but also as a draw engine. It finds you your ball cards, it finds you Pokegears, it finds you Night Stretchers, Earthen Vessels. It's a very good card in this deck. It is by far the best stadium. I know Artisan is kind of cool too. Artisan does get you your Roaring Moon, so it allows you to kind of be a bit more stable, right? Gets you your Pokemon in play. I don't really like Artisan because it helps the opponent. A lot of the time, it actually gives them more stuff to work with. I'm not a fan of Artisan. I think Pokestop is the best stadium for the deck. Yes, you can sometimes get those bad Pokestops. You discard 3 Sodas or, 3 supporters or just 3 cards you don't want to lose. But when this card hits, it hits. It's a very important card. Also can save you in a lot of situations where you need to find an Earthen Vessel or a Nest Ball to stay in the game, and Pokestop has got your back. Also, it gets you Secret Box, so it's, in my opinion, the best stadium for Ancient Box. And again, it a lot of the time lets you ramp up damage really quickly. Sometimes a Pokestop plus an Explorer's Guidance plus an Ultra Ball or an Earthen Vessel, a lot of the time can get you into a situation where you're taking big knockouts with your Baby Moon. And that's it for the trainers. Again, a lot of important cards in the deck here for the items and trainers and stuff. And then finally, to wrap things up here, I am going to be playing 7 copies of Dark Energy in the deck. It's most of the energies, what you need is 7 Dark. You don't need 8 Dark. 7 gets a lot of value with the Super Rod, the double Night Stretcher, and the Superior Energy Retrieval. 7 energy is the perfect amount of energy. You don't really need 8 energy. If we were maybe playing the other Koraidon in the format that does 30 for each ancient Pokemon in play, I could see a world where you would play the 8th energy being the fighting energy, but we're not playing that. We don't need fighting energy in the deck anyways. We can get away with 7 Dark. 7 Dark is literally the perfect amount of energy. With all the ways we have to put energy back into our hand, it's really not that big of a deal to play 7. Trust me, 7 is fine. We also have 4 Earthen Vessels, which technically count as 4 energy, right? So the Earthen Vessel, the 7 Dark, that's 11 energy in total. And you got the Secret Box, which gets you an Earthen Vessel. So that can be a 12th energy. So 7 energy is a perfect amount of energy to play in this deck. I never really needed to see a reason to play any more or any less than 7 energy. And that is my Ancient Box list. I really like it a lot. I think Ancient Box is a very underrated deck right now. It's got some good matchups, like Gardevoir is not bad. Dragapult is decent because you have the Monkey Dory, which helps a lot in that matchup. You're good into Miraidon. Usually if you can deal with an Iron Hands quick enough. You're pretty good into Archaladon and Goldengo. You're not bad into Regidrago if you end up hitting that, I guess, somehow. I would argue your worst matchups are like Lugia's kind of shaky. If they have a really good start, usually you lose to Lugia. But if Lugia fumbles a bit, usually you can overrun Lugia pretty quickly. Or if they bench too many 2-prizers, you can usually beat Lugia by going like counter catcher around their Legacy Energy and their Cinchinos and stuff. Snorlax is like a free win because you have Pekron in the deck, right? Pekron makes that matchup really good. So yeah, Snorlax is a great matchup too. Really good matchup spread right now. Ancient Box actually feels like a pretty good deck for EUIC. The one thing I will say about this deck, though, is that Ancient Box tends to be a little bricky sometimes. Sometimes you'll play the Ancient Box deck, you'll have these, like, really bad, really awkward, unplayable hands. That's the one negative thing about playing Ancient Box. It's not very consistent compared to other decks in the format. But usually when you're not bricking, this deck can be very good, and sometimes you can kind of just steamroll your opponent once you just turbo through your deck with Pokestop and Guidance and Greninja and stuff like that. You're very much doing a lot of damage with that Roaring Moon. And I really like this list a lot. I think Ancient Box, like I said, great deck, and definitely give it a try if you haven't already. It's a very powerful deck, and I think it's underrated right now. I don't know, if you got a League Cup or Challenge coming up this weekend and you're going to EUIC, you want to test Ancient Box, definitely give the deck a try. And yeah, like I said, if you enjoyed today's deck profile video, make sure to leave a like in the video. I definitely enjoy making these deck profile videos. If you want me to do more of them, again, leave a like, subscribe down below, and let me know in the comment section if you enjoyed the video. Would you add any other cards to this deck? Let me know what other cards you would put in your Ancient Box list to help tech for the meta right now. I'm interested to hear, and I'll catch you on another video very soon. Bye-bye.